All righty, everyone. I am super excited for this conversation. It's been one that I've been waiting on for a while, but we're here and we're ready to do it. I have David Patrick Harry here of Fractal Youniverse. I'm a big fan of his YouTube channel, and he's here today to enlighten us on all things spiritual, metaphysical, symbols, all kinds of crazy stuff. Thanks for jumping on the call or the Zoom, Patrick.
Oh, I appreciate it, brother. Thanks for having me.
You got it. So I want to know how. Like me, a guy from Southern Indiana ends up at Berkeley, and you're pretty much saying that you're studying that Jesus is a shaman or something along the lines of that. What's going on there?
Well, right now, that was kind of, I came here wanting to study people who are spiritual but not religious, and then how they use religious symbolism and implement it within their own lives and what particular symbols they're most interested in. But once I got here, I got a little disillusioned with the spiritual but not religious community.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't I realized that it was more of a title that people appropriate, even myself at the time. I mean, I consider myself spiritual but not religious, but then you ask somebody what exactly do you do that's spiritual, and maybe it's meditate, maybe it's take yoga, maybe it's doing something like that. But I just kind of became disillusioned with the people that I talked to and really immersing myself in that community. And I started to focus on the role of mushroom use particularly, but psychoactive substances within Christianity. And that led me to Carl Ruck. He's a classicist over at Boston University. And he's famous for the whole Eleusinian mysteries. So when they discovered ergot being used with and R. Gordon Wasson, he was the one that did the logical research. Albert Hoffman did the pharmacological research, and Gordon Wasson did a lot of the research as well in terms of history and understanding that with Ruck. But that ties into Jerry Brown's book and the Psychedelic Gospels. Mm-hmm. And the Psychedelic Gospels really opened my eyes, because before I got to Berkeley, I had no idea that even psychedelics were related to Christianity. So then once I started going down that rabbit hole, I found it really compelling. But
were you raised Christian?
I was raised Methodist. So I actually didn't. So during my undergraduate, I was studying biology, and then later I got interested in religious studies.
Were you undergraduate in Indiana, or were?
Yeah, it was IUPUI. It's Indiana University, Purdue University, Indianapolis.
Okay.
And I actually, first out of high school, I went to a small college called Manchester College to play basketball.
And you're a baller, huh?
Yeah. And I had a heart murmur. So because of my heart murmur, I was going to miss the first year of the basketball season because I didn't get cleared till later in the season. And therefore I transferred. So I transferred from the small college and back to a larger, it's like the third largest, fourth largest school. I think it's third in the state of Indiana. And that's IUPUI there in Indianapolis. And I thought I was going to kind of dedicate my life back to my Christian roots. Like I wanted to do what was right. And I took this biblical class on the Old Testament, and it totally shook my world because it showed, the two different creation myths within Genesis, all the different, how many different authors wrote these Old Testament books. It just, how inconsistent they were maybe historically.
Yeah.
It totally shook the religious foundation that I grew up on as a Methodist, and and interpreting scripture in a more literal perspective than a symbolic perspective. So then once that happened, I decided I'm just going to focus on science. And I spent about 3 years as a biology major doing all the different scientific courses, and pretty much became an atheist. And that was like, you move from one end of the spectrum to the other.
Mm-hmm. I was the same way, man. I was Catholic, and then I kind of threw the Jesus thing out probably by 6th or 7th grade, just from a literal perspective. Is the guy real? Is he? I don't know. I was just a little fishy. Right. But I still believed in a higher power. And then I got into college. You read a little bit of Richard Dawkins. You're like, man, this stuff's garbage.
Right. No, absolutely. And the whole academic lens is that it's a tradition. This is what I see now looking back. But you don't get the same irrational vibe you get about a Hindu or a Muslim or somebody from a more tribal tradition. But if you're a white person, if you're studying science, you know, and then you say you're a Christian, there's like this tinge of like, oh, why are, huh? Like, why? And so just kind of buying into all that, I decided to study, I took a comparative world religions course, and I really got introduced to Buddhism and Taoism and the Eastern traditions.
And when is this, like third or fourth year? Or?
Yeah, this is like mid-second year. And so I've already been taking all these biology courses and, you know, focusing on that. And then I take this comparative religion course just as one of these alternative courses you have to take. I do that, and it really opened my eyes to, I don't know, mysticism, I guess. That took me then to discovering Alan Watts and stuff like that, and really started listening to Watts, started to study Chinese. I spent 2 summers in southern China.
I think I saw that.
At Sun Yat-sen University. And that also was very eye-opening, because I realized that I didn't want to study Chinese as an academic, because it was totally all-encompassing and not really the mystical enlightenment I was looking for, in terms of, it's like you're moving this whole journey from moving from whatever tradition you're in to atheism to spirituality. It's like you're always trying to find this thing, this aha, this holy grail, this, you know, oh, this is what it is. And then I get to China and I see how materialistic, consumeristic the whole culture is. I mean, in fact, you talk to modern Chinese people, most of them frown when you bring up Taoism or these more traditional forms of, that's totally, I mean, because the Cultural Revolution was all about destroying Chinese history and creating a new idea of what Chinese means.
I was listening to that today. Sheldrake was doing, it was either your channel or there's another channel that shows a Sheldrake talking about how when the atheists really came into power in the French Revolution, you know, they went and they just like tried getting rid of religion. That's kind of where science is going now, you know?
Right, absolutely. Well, absolutely. I think that's exactly what it's tried to do since the 1800s. And then Nietzsche really hit that off with talking about the death of God, because of the epistemological structures that were developed. Really, you know, there was no room for this Judeo-Christian understanding of God in a very literal, you know, Protestant Reformation type of way. So anyways, once I went to China and studied that, it was like the second time I went to China, I found Terence McKenna, and then I took psychedelics, and then that turned me on to what you argue as, you know, spirituality or whatnot.
Like something's going on here. That's me too. I first heard astral projection. I got into some Alan Watts stuff. I heard about out-of-body experiences. And then I found some Terence McKenna. And then when I heard about ayahuasca, I'm like, okay, I'm looking for this spiritual experience that I cannot deny. And that's kind of what I got with psychedelics. I was like, actually the first time I sat with medicine, it did nothing. And I'm like, it really enforced my atheistic drive. I'm like, these people are crazy. They're out of their minds. And it gave me exactly what I needed, though, because the second time it blew my top off. And so, yeah, I just relate a lot to what you're saying there.
No, absolutely. So the similar way, it was, my first encounter was with LSD. And once I had that experience, I was totally convinced that the world was arguably more magical than than I previously perceived it to be. And that had led me on a radical journey. I mean, Terence McKenna, although there's a lot of things that I may disagree with now, but he led me, I mean, he was monumental in terms of being almost like a rocket ship, in terms of really cutting through the bullshit and finding what's most authentic about religion, spirituality.
The first time I heard his voice, there was like magic in it. Do you know, I literally, I think the first 3 talks I heard by him, I was like, this guy sounds crazy. This is dumb. And the first YouTube message I heard it's called The Message. I don't know if you've seen that one. It's from like 9 years ago. Yeah. And I'm like, this guy's crazy. I was going to a slow pitch softball game, and I had that playing in my Jeep with like 3 of my friends. I'm like, listen to this guy. He's crazy, but he knows it. And yeah, I got stuck on Terence. I would watch an Alan Watts video every night before bed. I think it's Tragedy and Hope's YouTube video. Man.
Oh yeah. YouTube was monumental in my journey. It's because it's so much about knowing what to look for, because there's so much out there. So even when because some of the information you get on YouTube isn't as authentic as like academic books or, you know, just books in general, but you don't know what books to get into. I mean, there's so much out there.
Yeah, library is like, where do you start? Literally.
Exactly. So, and I think that's part of why maybe Jordan Peterson has been so popular, is because he's giving a starting point, a
Yeah.
very, very fundamental starting point for a lot of men and women, of course, but it's like, obviously, he's very popular with men and obviously mostly.
We need it, man.
No,
We men
absolutely.
need it so bad.
It's crazy how, well, I digress, but just masculinity in general. I mean, just being masculine is like old fashioned somehow. It's,
Responsibility,
yeah.
hard work. Yeah.
Or running a family. This is the thing I've noticed within, the psychedelic community particularly, is like, Terence McKenna talked about only having the one child solution. Well, I mean, that's all great, but that's not something I plan on doing. But just the idea of like having a normal family, like create, what that
family
entails, what type of life you have. Exactly. It's like, it's like nobody talks about that. The psychedelic community is filled with like, 30-some-year-old single guys, and it's like, well, this is only part of the journey of life, like this discovery that we're all kind of experiencing through these mystical substances, these magical plants, and then learning and then understanding history, kind of remembering history. I mean, that's what I almost perceive it as, is like Terence McKenna talks about, we're like a species with amnesia.
Mm-hmm.
We are. And so information is so important in terms of piecing back together, what happened and why we're here and how we got here. And I just noticed that traditional values are totally lacking. I mean, it's everything is, and I'm totally for the dissolution of boundaries. That's one of his big things is psychedelics is all boundaries, which they totally do. But that doesn't mean all boundaries are bad. And that doesn't mean when you're not high, boundaries are.
So my experience was when I was home, I became very liberal. So I was born and raised on Monsanto farm, and I saw the food guide pyramid. I looked into the organic stuff. I'm like, whoa, this is a little whack. So all my friends were like, oh, Mo went off the deep end. He's a liberal hippie now. He's moving to California. And I kind of thought myself, I'm kind of liberal. And I move out here. I'm like, no, I'm really conservative. And I'm not conservative. I'm libertarian.
Right.
Do what you want. Don't hurt anyone. And I understand the argument for a wall. I understand the argument for against a wall. We need, like Peterson says, we need liberals, we need conservatives, and there needs to be kind of a middle ground too. So I don't know, where do you identify on either side, or?
No, absolutely. When I first started, I was always considered like a radical liberal hippie type person, although I never looked like a hippie, but like during my undergraduate and even my master's program at the University of Illinois in Champaign.
And what was the title of your master's thesis?
Well, it was arguing that Jesus was a shaman based on the Greek.
We can get into that too.
The Gospel of Mark. So the Gospel of Mark is unique because it's one of the oldest Gospels that we know of. But then it's the only Gospel to also preserve Aramaic words, which I argue with words of power, because the only time the Aramaic words were displayed, which are in about every Bible. It's not like they hide it, but it's always when he's performing a miracle. So I was arguing based on the Greek and choosing a little Greek word. I mean, it wasn't the strongest thesis paper because my Greek wasn't the strongest, but it was a way that a professor, I showed him this angle and he thought it was very neat.
But that's what college is supposed to be about. You're supposed to go and invent and go after new ideas. Don't reprove the same idea. Like, we're supposed to be reinventing and doing new things. Like, that's when I heard that, I'm like, that's badass.
Right. So that's exactly what I tried to do, was argue that there was already this very controversial scholar that wrote about Jesus being a magician. And it turns out he did this to almost, he had a lot of very interesting aspects to perpetuate his argument, but he was also just trying to put a thumb in the establishment's face.
Yeah.
And he was a very controversial guy in general.
This isn't Allegro, right? Allegro was the Sacred Cross. And for you,
on his name, but the book's called Jesus the Magician.
Okay.
And
is it worth reading?
Yeah, it's very interesting. It's very interesting. The guy, he was an atheist. He was homosexual in the 60s and 70s, and really just wanted to try to take down Jesus as the historical, divine, godlike figure, and try to just make him as this regular magician guy around the Mediterranean. And he had a lot of really great points. This is where I found the Aramaic words of power, and this is where I started to try to look for Greek words that would suggest magical abilities and stuff like that. And then so I took his work, and then I argued that he's not a magician because he's never paid for anything, but then he's actually a shaman, right?
Yeah.
It's not like Jesus was doing love spells, but he was healing people, and that's the main focus of a shaman. And so my whole thing was that Jesus, was trying to almost create a historical understanding of him as a shamanic figure. Now, if in terms of do I believe in historical Jesus, that's really up in the air because there's not a whole lot of evidence to suggest either way, one way or the other. Like there's enough of a tidal wave in the 30, 50 years after his life, something happened.
Something went down.
Yes, but the documentation of him as a historical figure is just really scarce. So
it's super weird. And I was a history major, and I loved history as a kid, and I did that. I was like, okay, where's he at over here? I don't see him here. I don't see him here. So I don't know. I'm at the point now with Jesus where I'm focusing on the other things besides the physical. Like it does that to me, it doesn't matter right now. It's more about it's an acclamation of all these different characteristics of people that are combined into one person, and you try to embody it. And that's the way I see Christianity now.
Absolutely. Me too. I mean, I've been telling people that in response, because within the last, I would say a couple months, I've actively said that I'm Christian, which has caused a lot of people who know me before, like, what? You're Christian? Why are you Christian? What happened? And then I started saying, well, no. It's not that I'm like irrational or anything. It's that, just push away any type interpretation, and then hear my case that the archetypes and the symbolism and the myths embedded with Christianity and even the non-canonical scriptures are true. This was one of the revelation. The reason I became quote unquote a Christian is because on LSD here in Berkeley, I had this epiphany that the Logos is absolutely real. Like the Logos is absolutely real. And it came after I listened to this lecture. There's a scholar here at UC Berkeley named Terence Deacon,
okay,
neuroanthropologist, and he has a very interesting theory that has to do with that every animal species evolves to suit a particular niche. Normally it's an environmental physical niche, but he argues that humans have developed this symbolic niche, and that there's an entire orthogonal ontology that we live in, that we literally live in a symbolic world. So he uses DNA evidence to show the degradation of DNA and how that corresponds to like bird species who are captive. So the same bird species that are wild and then captive, they actually lose parts of their DNA, but the captive birds have more variety of songs. So environmental pressure. So this leads to his theory. Then we create societies. This lessens environmental pressure. This allows for more symbolic diversity, which leads into language, which leads into poetry, which leads into all this stuff. And then he connects it biologically. So the formation of our own brain has to do with the use of symbols and all this stuff. So he has this really novel theory and he's an atheist, and he came and presented at the Dominican schools where I watched this lecture at, and the title of his presentation was How the Word Became Flesh, because what he's literally arguing is based on science that the whole formation of our species is based on the use of symbols, and that symbols are used to discover real aspects of reality. So he uses like the instance of prime numbers. So numbers themselves, mathematics themselves, can be represented in all these cultural variant forms. But the discovery that there's prime numbers, there's numbers that are indivisible, is true no matter what. That's a literal fact of the universe. And so if anything exists in the universe that's higher intelligent, it knows about that. And it's created a symbol system to discover it. So he's talking about how then symbols are an extension of our mind. It's just, to me, that then corresponds with the whole ayahuasca experience with when people, again, I haven't had the traditional ayahuasca experience, but people like Terence McKenna and Aubrey Graham and all these different people talk about how like language, right? And Terence references Philo-Judea. So Philo-Judea talked about how the logos would move through this point where it become from auditorial to visual, and that this is like a higher form of language, because you would literally see what somebody is saying.
Mm-hmm.
And on LSD one night, it just exploded my mind that the logos is real, that language is God, that language, symbolic representation, is the way it literally pulled us out from the animal kingdom. And now we've erected these entire structures totally based on the use of symbols. And that is God. And that's why then these synchronistic patterns, the archetypes that are embedded in our psychology. One of the papers that I'm trying to write right now has to do with what the function of myth within society, and how we live myth out, and we're actually acting these things out, and it develops our cognitive structures. But then the stories, how do they fit all these synchronistic, archetypal patterns all around the world from cultures that never existed? Why do they have the similar symbols? And it's because humanity is experiencing the same physical reality, and then it takes that reality, that experience, and then implementizes it into myths, stories, and legends.
It's like the collective unconscious is manifesting itself outside of us, so we can communicate with it or something.
Right, and then it's a feedback loop, because the myths that we read literally are ourselves, and it's again,
cool.
So
it's a movie out in front of you, but it's really what's inside of you.
Exactly, and it's all connected, and so but it's all tied to the logos, because none of that stuff could present itself without language.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's the beauty of Christianity. This gets to why I now identify as a Christian, is because Christianity is the only religious tradition I know of that identified language, the logos, as God.
Yeah. In the beginning was the word. Well, at judo, you're saying Jewish too, right?
They're more focused on the law. So
that's true.
They have a covenant with Yahweh, where if they uphold the law, then they're blessed by God. Mm-hmm. Now they have Genesis and the creation myth has to do with about speaking the world into existence. So it was already embedded within the Jewish tradition. However, back then it was just identified as magic. There was no, magic didn't have so that's, magic has been a huge fascination of mine, mm-hmm. from undergraduate to my studies.
I've been, ever since people told me magic wasn't real, and especially in the last couple of years, one of the reasons I have conversations like this, I listen to Terence, I go after these psychedelic experiences, and psychedelic too just means revealing of the psyche. It doesn't even mean drugs or whatever, plant medicines. Exactly. It just means these experiences, weightlifting, breathing, that reveal something that's within our mind. And I don't know how we got in such a mess that we feel, at least me, after that one ayahuasca session, I went outside and nothing happened. I did 3 cups. I had a buddy that was 100 pounds heavier than me sitting next to me, whacked out of his mind, in a good way. I don't want to give it a bad rap. He was having an amazing experience. And I looked at him, I'm like, nothing's happened to me. And I went up to the shaman, and after my 3rd cup, I sat down, nothing happened. I went outside at the stars and I stared at him, and I'm like, man, I'm just this meat machine, but it was weird. One of my friends came out and he's like, what are you looking for? And I was like, I just want to feel connected to it. I don't feel like I belong here, or I don't feel it. And he's like, dude, whether or not you feel it, you're here, you're part of the pie. If this is a pizza, you're pepperoni on it. So whether or not, but do you know what I'm saying? We have this weird disconnect. And I think that Sheldrake was talking about today, how our purpose has just been completely whacked out. Materialism is the purpose now. We don't have responsibility. We don't have the religious experiences that kept us connected to the universe. So now we just consume.
Right. No, I totally agree. And that's part of what I'm trying to articulate within the paper I'm writing on myth and sociology, is that, and this also because one of the books that I'm using is Maps of Meaning from Jordan Peterson, but I'm using Emile Durkheim in terms of, Emile Durkheim has this theory of collective representations and this idea that society is God. So if God is to obtain any type of physical form, it is society as a whole, because it's the only thing that encompasses all the logic, all the knowledge, all the language within a given society.
That's where we literally get to the point where with God and trying to find him, it's like we're just so disconnected. It's so many layers. And that's where I feel like psychedelics can peel back those layers. But we can't encompass God. But if you want to call God or the universe, because like you're saying, it encompasses everything that has been, everything that is to be. It's you, it's me. It's so much. But we as humans, I understand the drive to know and understand. That's what makes, in my opinion, makes life so much fun, is to go out and learn these things.
Absolutely. So what I'm trying to articulate is that within these myths, within these theologies, these religious stories, it contains a value system, again, a hierarchy of values.
Mm-hmm.
And because of the whole scientific revolution and this emphasis on the material, this we associate now truth with material facts.
Yes. Hey, if it doesn't exist, it's not real. Like, it's got to be hard.
And what I'm arguing is that meaning it should be higher than fact.
Yep,
right?
I agree.
So what's meaningful, right? A relationship, your children, your career, your pursuits, your passions,
love,
more married than material facts. And so by getting away from Western civilization by not understanding these myths in a new way, of course we've led to materialism, because the embedded epistemological structures of our minds associates the highest veracity with material. And truth isn't material. I mean, it can be represented within that, but it's something experienced.
It just kind of, what was very interesting is I kind of had a little bit of a revelation, and you've probably heard Terence tell the story about doubting Thomas. Right?
Oh, yeah.
Thomas was the apostle, but he's like, what was the difference? Thomas got to touch the wounds of Jesus. And like, it's weird because what I just kind of popped up and thought about is like the way out of materialism is through materialism. It's to like disprove it. It's to like show you that like you can't touch everything. And we don't have that. Like I still have a really hard time with that. I'm still very scientific when I'm treating my patients. I'm like, I want to see your labs. If I don't see your labs, like, then I don't know what the heck's going on. So,
So take medicine, for example. That's perfect because it doesn't disprove the necessity for material facts and statistics and results, lab results and all this stuff. But science doesn't recognize that the person that's being healed can also begin to heal themselves, and that mind is over matter.
Yes.
Mind is where language comes out, and mind is the thing that separates us from the rest of the animal kingdom. And so then you can get into these theologies where, literally, God can act on the world, to use theological language, although I don't think of God as this impersonal in the sky. But I do think that it is conscious, maybe it's consciousness itself. Maybe it's, I don't know what it is, but
sometimes that's all you got to do, man. Take a step back and be like, I don't know what this is.
Right.
You've heard, is it Paul Stamets, the mushroom guy? Talks about the Paul Stamets. Is that the mushroom guy? He talks about how he had a stutter, and then he took the mushrooms and stuff, and knocked him away, man. And that stuff blows my mind when it comes to being a doctor and the way that we can heal. We think, pill. We think materialism. But we're really starting to see from a psychological... Jordan Peterson had made an argument that all diseases are literally a front because you have some deep underlying psychological issue. I heard in one of his talks. I was like, whoa. And I see that, man.
But that would lead credence to these shamanic ways of healing, right? Because it's about being in balance. And so then take the myths of Jesus, healing people. And his whole thing is about speaking truth into the world.
He never gets a herb or anything. He says things.
He says things. He speaks the world into a correct place. And this gets back into Jordan Peterson, free speech, truth, and all this. But, it makes you think that maybe this stuff isn't as impossible as we're told to perceive that it is, because you realize that the material box is an easy box to control people, right? I mean, I've done magical rituals before I decided to become more religious, and I'm telling you, magic is real. I'm almost convinced that reality is a hologram that's delayed, right? It's like a delayed hologram. And so these ideas of like the secret of positive thinking, of writing down your dreams, of doing all this stuff, like it does affect reality in a way. And so then, so Grant Morrison, he's a comic book writer. He wrote like The Incredibles, Pixar movie. So he wrote that comic, but he he was very into magic. And so he talked about using like a sigil magic. So you'd write down a phrase. So say, I want to have a job in the next 2 months, or my highest passion is to have a good paying job in the next month or 2 months. You write that down, then you X out all the vowels, because vowels are only phonetic. They don't contain meaning. Meaning within words is only contained within consonants. So if you were to look at a sentence and actually write out all the, write out cross out the vowels, you would almost be able to still make out what the word means, because the meaning is within the consonants. Vowels are just phonetic. So you mark out all the vowels because they don't mean anything. Then you have this long series of consonants, and you cross out everything that repeats. So then you'll have 12, 15 different consonants, and then you create a symbol with those. So now that symbol that looks nothing like the original sentence is the embodiment of that entire desire. And where did it come from? It came from a non-physical place. And then you create it in a physical way, and then you create a symbol that changes it, and then you can begin to try to put that into your subconscious and manifest it.
That's nuts, man. That's crazy. That like affirmations and aphorisms, and it's almost like that, but you're saying it from a symbol perspective. And that's why religion use it. Like you look at and you see a cross. Is that kind of right?
Exactly. No, exactly. That's why religion uses it. That's why marketing uses it. I mean, because we live in a materialistic world that's kind of devoid of actual spirit, it's still being used on us. All these corporate logos are still sigils. Like they're still embedded with deep symbolic meaning. Whether it's like the Pegasus horse of mobile oil, like whatever it is, these symbols that they use are affecting us at a subconscious level, because we are connected. Again, in my argument, it's the logos. It's all the logos. And
you're blowing my mind. I was wondering why. I remember when you went off on the tear of the symbolisms on your YouTube channel. Like every day you're popping them out. I'm like, man, this guy really likes symbols. What's going on here? And now I understand. Like that's nuts. And the more you understand all those symbols, man, you're unlocking the language of the universe in a way. Kind of like that.
At least exactly, the language that articulated our experience of the universe, right? Like the flying horse, it doesn't mean that there are flying horses on the planet, right? It means that you have to deconstruct that myth and figure out what's being symbolized there, because whatever is true. And I'm convinced that things don't persist through time unless they're true. Right? So
I like that. I like that that definition of truth. I do.
So things have to be durable, and that's why I think part of my return back to Christianity is that Christianity is extremely durable, and it's one of the few religions that has so much color to it in terms of like its appropriation. So in Peru, for example, all these shamans, a lot of these shamans that are coming to the United States and performing these ayahuasca rituals, they go to Christian churches, and the Christian churches are filled with the psychedelic symbols.
Dude, like Catholic cathedrals, you can just feel the power.
The shaman was already worshiping the sun. I mean, that's what Christianity is, a solar religion. And so you can understand then that these planets are physical representation of these things that are trying to be symbolized through language.
Well, and I always argued for that. I listened to Sheldrake's talk on if the sun was conscious. And it's like, well, this thing, literally the sun gives us light. It gives us, without the sun, we're all dead. It gives us heat. Like, so without the sun, like, what is a God? What is a God? A God is something that transcends over time, and he gives us all energy. And like, that's what that thing does. Really.
Exactly. And that's part of why I returned back to Christianity, because if you were going to worship one of the planets, it would be that.
Yeah.
But then you can also understand that
But what do you mean by worship? But you wake up with it, you go to bed with it, you watch it, it grows your crops.
Exactly. And Jesus was literally the sun. I mean, these early church fathers who incorporated all these myths and put them together, it's not like they didn't know what they were doing. And, and that's one of the things that I found, again, within the psychedelic community, is that they discovered that Christianity is a solar religion, and then they think that it means nothing.
Yeah. Oh, those idiots. Yeah, those dummies, they thought the God was the planets. Like, dude, that's a very sophisticated idea, and actually really cool. Like,
on top of the idea of the logos, I mean, that's really powerful.
And it's that idea of archetypes that runs so deep, and it's like whatever way you try and cut it, like you still get the answer you're looking for. Like when you say the God, the sun, God, and then the sun, like a human sun is what keeps the world alive. Like Jesus, the baby. We're looking at this culture that's like, what's the most important thing? A child being born. It doesn't matter if it's in a stable, it's in the winter. It doesn't matter. Like, that thing is important.
Right, exactly. Exactly. So then even linguistically, the way we talk about the Son of God with Jesus, right? Well, it's literally this, who owns the sun in the sky?
Yeah.
It's, that's God's son.
Yeah. The universal principal owner, whatever the heck it is.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so then that's, for me, it's like you start to realize that these myths are true in very different ways. And that's for all the religions. I mean, Judaism has to do a lot with Saturnian symbolism, with the planet Saturn. That's why they worship on the Sabbath is on Saturday. For Christians, it's on the sun's day, right? Sunday. And then you have the moon's day on Monday. And in Islam, they're worshiping the moon and the planet Venus. That's what the whole crescent moon and the star is, the morning star. So right there, that's why they worship on Friday. Friday's the day of Venus.
Okay.
The mosque goes to, Muslims go to the mosque on Friday because that's the day of Venus. It all has to match up. Like sympathetic magic is real. All religion's based on it. Like if you didn't have all the symbols matching up, you can't funnel the energies of the cosmos into whatever you're trying to create. And so for me, then the sun is the most powerful of the planetary deities, because that's what was going on, and it's still going on. And it doesn't mean that it's not real. It means that maybe you should look at it in a new way.
Yeah. And then aligning with it. Like a lot of people, the God of the Old Testament, he's an asshole, but it's kind of like the sun. Like you get up when the sun gets up, you go down when the sun goes down. Like it's in charge. Like you don't get to pick that. Like people are like, well, if I were moral, then I wouldn't have done this in the Bible. I'm like, well, you're creating this artificially floating with there's no moral ground. There's no ground to your morality. You're just making things up. And that's again where I like the Peterson definition of like these cultural things came out of biology. And the truth is that they've lasted over a longer period of time, meaning like they've stood up to the test of time. And during time, they're going to get challenged in a variety of ways. So if they're still existing, they're probably pretty good ideas. Like for an idea to exist without being written down, without YouTube for 2,000 years, like that's a pretty strong idea, I would assume. Otherwise, the whole world is just dumb and you were raised by dumb ancestors, which probably isn't a good way to look at it either.
Right. And so exactly. And so the whole logos theology, that's why, again, I'm so convinced of it, because I think it's an undeniable force.
Mm-hmm. I wonder if you kind of follow me too. When I first started listening to Terence, there were a lot of things that I agreed with him, but within my revelation and listening to more Jordan Peterson, there are things I'm like, I don't know if and I'm still trying to find my way, and I don't want to be dogmatic and follow anyone blindly. But McKenna kind of has, I don't know if if it's a postmodern. One of his later talks, he talked about postmodernism, and in your videos, you can kind of elaborate on that. How people are talking about Peterson and McKenna don't crash, or they clash, and then kind of your opinion or what you see there. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So there's, absolutely. And for McKenna, I mean, I wonder if he would still be talking about feminism in the same way in 2019 as he was in the 80s and 90s, because third wave feminism is so different, right? He was talking about a guy in mind. He's talking about Mother Nature. He's talking about all these things using the same language we do in the modern tense to talk about feminism. Yeah. But he's not talking about, cisgendered men, So and I do think, like, I would argue, again, you can't help from acting out your culture. So Terence McKenna himself, with his whole, his whole theory about 2012 and the timeline and novelty theory. This is another millenarian, apocalyptic Christian, the coming of Christ, understanding of the world. Right? I mean, literally, he was again acting out the myth. He wasn't using that language. He's using very scientific, psychedelic themed understandings of time and the unfoldment of novelty. And I'm convinced that the world is getting more novel. So I'm down with this whole novelty theory. Yep. Now, obviously, we can get into what happened in 2012 or whatnot.
But again, I think it was symbolic. Whether the world ended, like something changed, I think. But I don't know. I wasn't around in the 1950s and 60s, but energetically, my mind shifted. And I don't know if it was just because I was at that age where every 22, 23-year-old kind of shifts. But I just, I don't know, man. I do feel like something happened there.
I do too. And I don't know exactly what I would call it, but, within the more fringe spiritual community, there's all these ideas of like how 2012 was the ending of like family karma and all this different stuff, and that it's it's the kind of the axis gateway to the age of Aquarius and all this stuff, which is the age of truth. And I don't know. I think it's hard to understand what's going on. It's hard to understand what Trump symbolizes in the world, because that's another thing. Like we can all agree that he's a megalomaniac, egotistical, like billionaire who says he's great at everything. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, he is extremely competent in terms of the things that he says he's going to do. And he's held his word much more than any of the politicians leading up to this point, despite him having a huge ego. It's like you have to be able to look at both and whether it be like the whole Russia collusion thing. I mean, I like that whole hoax was made up by Hillary Clinton, by the Obama administration, using British and Australian spies and all this stuff. Like everything that they're accusing Trump of, and it's all a way to try to get the focus point on him, so you can't see what they did. And the media's refusal to accept it. Go ahead.
Yeah, I didn't know if we were going to get to the Illuminati, man, but we're running right down that. Yeah, I'm with you 100%, and I think that the Bushes, Obama, Clintons, they're a big gang. They've been running the government for a while. I didn't vote for Trump, but it's still like, okay, something different is definitely happening here. And the systems and the powers that be and everything that was in kind of before. And I don't know if the Illuminati was, I have a really weird, again, kind of defensive Christianity and Catholicism in particular, because again, my argument for Catholicism is like, it's existed. It's stood the test of time. Is it corrupt? Hell yeah, man. It is really corrupt. Everything out there is corrupt as hell, though. It's like, what do? You're like, nothing's going to be perfect. We're all humans. And I come from this angle of like, yeah, I kind of left the church. I still go. I'm still in this place of figuring it out. But at the end of the day, it's like, what are the results? And it's all part of, like medicine, it's a symptom. There's a disease, and it doesn't even need to be a disease, but anytime you have a chemical reaction, you're going to get a certain other type of chemical reaction. So like, this is happening. It's like, it's not wrong. Like I see that, and people are like, well, the universe isn't making sense. This is wrong. I'm like, dude, this happened for a reason.
Yeah, exactly. It's all of synchronicity. I mean, the fact that he was able to beat the establishment. I mean, the entire establishment. And I post things on Facebook, as you know.
I've been watching you, man.
Annoy people and try to shake people out of these paradigms, because we don't, like, no one paradigm is suitable anymore.
Yeah.
And you have to be able to understand that and become an individual and be able to see the pluralistic nature of reality. And
what pisses me off so much about that is when it gets to the point where it kind of hinders things moving forward. Like the psychedelic community, they had the whole, like, we got to start including minorities and all. I'm like, if I'm such a libertarian, like, leave people alone. If certain people don't want to participate, it doesn't matter what the color of their skin is. That in itself is a very, like, racist idea. Well, we don't have this colored skin here. Like, oh, are you saying that this colored skin and this colored skin don't think the same? Isn't that a racist comment? And like, we don't need that stuff holding our progress back.
I'm convinced it's a magical spell. I'm convinced that most of this cultural stuff that's going on are because magic
reptilians, man,
like framing the world in a particular, like framing it in a particular way, forcing people to view the world through that frame. Mm-hmm. And I think this whole racial stuff is a way to reinsert racism.
Yeah,
it's not a progression; it's a regression.
Yeah, I think so.
How do people not see it? I mean, and that's why I'm convinced a lot of this in terms of language and linguistic expression and the framing of reality and forcing people to perceive it in certain ways. Mm-hmm. And that's what for me, psychedelics got me out of that. Terence McKenna helped me understand magic, understand the role of language, understand all these things. But then I see people and they're totally still trapped in those things, right? I mean, like the whole Nazi thing, everybody's a racist. I mean, it's just, it's so ridiculous.
They're easy cop-outs. And I think this comes down to, I think it was Nietzsche just talked about, like, people are lazy and they always look for kind of a way out of anything. What does magic mean to you? We've talked about magic a little bit.
Right. So for me, magic is um, well, it's so.
I want to say something before.
Yeah.
One problem that I do have is when you find magic and people describe it by science. Okay, just like, okay, the Wright brothers learned to fly. Okay, 150 years ago, if you said, I'm going to fly, you're crazy. Like, that doesn't work. Birds can fly. Like, it was out of the paradigm of thinking. It'd be like you telling me, like, hey, Michael, I'm going to go create a time machine. I'm like, you're out of your mind. And then you go and do something like that. That's, to me, that would be, magic. Like, you're doing something that was thought was impossible. And then when people are like, well, they didn't really flew, they just had a combustion engine that turned a propeller, and then they knew the laws of gravity. And it's like, I see that all the time, people degrading these amazing experiences. And I'm like, where is the fun in life supposed to come from?
Right. Exactly. So for me, I mean, at the most basic level, magic is taking non-physical ideas, desires, and then implementing them in physical ways and causing, reality to change. And I use that in a very loose understanding because for me, religion is a sort of magic.
Yeah,
but
I agree.
But not in a negative way. I mean, like here in the GTU, because I go to the Graduate Theological Union here in Berkeley, when I talk about religion being magical, it really ruffles a lot of feathers because for them, magic is this one thing and then religion is something else. Because
what's it, tarot cards to them? You know what?
Well, yeah, I mean, but in the Christian perspective, magic is satanic because magic has to do with the implementation of man's will, and man is the beast, 666. And this is where I see the left, the very atheistic, leftist state of affairs in the political landscape in America. I would never characterize it as satanic, but it's acting out that myth in terms like the whole Soviet Union, communist, China, right? Nazi Germany.
That's pretty cool. Satanic, man. I'm joining you on that train, dude.
So what that is about no longer, because the whole Lord's Prayer is about, doing the will in heaven as, heaven here on earth. It's doing this universal will. It's doing this cosmic will, this God's will, not my will. My will is embedded because I want to be a part of the harmony within God's will.
Yeah.
And so from that perspective, magic is about, so from the traditional Christian perspective, that is religion, doing God's will. And then magic is man implementing his will onto the world.
Oh, cool. I like that. That's good, man. So magic is man implementing God's will to create thoughts into material.
Right. So magic is like using the logos, using ritual, using the ways to affect the hologram of reality. So you're using all those things, but you're doing it for the purposes of your own desire, whether that's to get money, to get laid, to, become successful, whatever it is. And then you can do these rituals and you can do these different understandings. You can say these incantations and then things start to happen. But there's always a price for it. Again, in the larger religious understanding, there's a price for that because you're not totally in congruence with the harmony of the universe. Now, maybe all those things you can achieve through this larger, God's will, this universal will type thing. And that's where then it's like this faith of like submitting to this force that you can't see.
Yeah, like from what I'm hearing, there's a disconnect between me and say God and the mission. But the way I can find out the mission and the ideas of Christianity is if I follow the 10 commandments, it's kind of like it's almost like a pipe, and I can't fit down the pipe perfectly. But if I do those things, I'll fit better.
Right, exactly. And so from that perspective, I mean, I see the lack of religion, the lack of traditional myths as leading towards a satanic world because it's totally run by materialism, and therefore it's totally run by individuals' will, and therefore there's going to be a hierarchy of people's will, and therefore it's going to be a hierarchy of power. And so for me, when I read like Foucault and how the world is all about power and all this stuff, well, he's describing that world.
Yeah.
He's describing the world that
without
he lived
God.
in as an atheist, as a guy who loved to have sex with young boys. He spread his AIDS. I'm not.
Yeah, no, I've heard about him. Yeah, you can talk about him. He was a wacko.
It was like the epitome of intellectuality in the humanities right now. I mean, anything you do is done through a lens of Foucault because it's all about power. Wow. And the reason it's all about power is because there's nothing there, right? So therefore, what is there? Well, it's people oppressing other people. And so then you get the oppressor and the oppressed narrative.
Yeah,
And
to them, their God is power.
exactly.
Yeah,
And,
like
and that gets back to these traditional Christian understandings of Satan,
yeah,
right? And the Gnostic
arrogance.
understandings of the world being run by the the demiurge.
Mm-hmm. What are they? Demi what? I
The
think I.
demiurge. Okay, so in Gnostic Christianity, they were dualists. So they didn't. So in the very early Christian, Gnostic Christianity wasn't even one thing. I mean, Gnostics were just a way to describe all these people who identified with Christian understandings, but had very different interpretations. But one of the main things was that they were dualists, and they believed in the world as good and evil. And this is the same thing with Manichaeanism. And they believed that the world was literally run by the demiurge, the devil, Satan, the fallen angel, right? So he's here with us.
I've heard that theory. What is that? That's demi. What's it called?
It's called the demiurge.
And the idea is that basically, when Lucifer kicked out of heaven, he's literally the God that's running
this place.
like even Catholicism. I've heard that.
Right. Exactly.
So like when we're like.
Right, not that
like
I'm
Enki, like you get into Sumerian, like Enki is the fallen. Have you heard that? Enki is yeah. I don't know. I get so confused. It's kind of like earlier when we were talking about politics, and it's like, is Trump part of the system? What if Trump is just actually part of the system so far in that, it's like it's an exception. It's a double agent within a double agent.
I'm convinced he's not, just based on how upset he makes other people.
Because of the magic. He disrupts the magical spell that's induced in other people.
Because they haven't implemented man's will. This was the whole Agenda 21. This is the globalist agenda. All this stuff is
Alex Jones
being implemented into the world through rituals, through ceremonies, through political, I mean, just like when they announced the new Congress, that is a magical ritual.
Yeah, I agree.
That's what that stuff is. And so...
But I don't believe in magic. I don't believe in rituals. I don't believe in that. I'm atheist.
But everybody lives it. And right? So that's exactly what he's doing. He's totally putting a wrench in things in terms of, again, this man-made will of how the world should be. Essentially a one-world government ruled by the people who have always ruled the world. Yeah. I mean, it's the same people. And that's one of the things I realized here in California, because it's so expensive to live, is how the wealthy are always wealthy. And like the stratification of classes
you can't get out, man.
More pronounced here in California than the Midwest. I mean, in the Midwest, the wealthy people live right next to the middle class, and they're friends. And there's no. In California, there is stratification of class, and it's very serious. And they don't even interact with each other.
Yep, I live in Carlsbad, which is north of San Diego. I pay $1,100 to rent one room in a 3-bedroom house, and that's like a cheap, and I don't even know if I want to ask what you're paying. But my sister has a 3-bedroom house, and her mortgage is like that price.
Exactly. And I mean, I plan on moving back to Indiana when.
I am curious. What do you want to do with your degree? Where do you see yourself? Like, where are you going? 5 years, 10 years?
5 years. Well, I want to teach at a university. I want to have a basic, be a professor at a university, talking about sociology and religion, introduction to and comparative religious course. I really opened my mind, show people about religion, talk to people about sociology. I want to teach a class on, psychedelics and religion, on mysticism, that kind of stuff. But within the last, particularly the last couple of months after these 2 LSD experiences, I really want to start a community, start a church, not in like some guru type way, because I would never, I don't want
Joseph Smith, is that right? Right? Mormon guy. What's his name?
Oh yeah. No. Not
this is the beginning of the Scientology. But
yeah, no magic tablets.
Okay.
But I want to have a place where we can enact our own rituals, right? So we can do, like, I don't know if you're familiar with the inside of an Orthodox church and how they paint the entire walls all the way up to the ceiling. And so inside of an Orthodox church, all the walls are painted, and they're all painted with the saints and the biblical stories, and all the different narratives are all.
Hold on, Orthodox, like the cathedrals and.
Yeah. So they call themselves churches, but cathedrals are in Catholicism. But exactly, just like that, they're very ornate, and they're very beautiful and extremely colorful on the inside. And one of the things that I feel like I'm being called to do is to just have a place. Indiana is unique because they have this Religious Freedom Act where so like the Church of Cannabis exists in Indianapolis, Indiana. Not that they go and they smoke cannabis every day, but Indiana, being a conservative state, actually has a rule where you can create any type of religion that you want and you're protected. And I want to create a sort of a church devoted towards the Logos. That it's going to be psychedelic themed, but people aren't going to be taking psychedelics inside the church, necessarily. But
maybe they will.
But have a community where you can talk about all this stuff. I mean, because to me, this has been the most impactful part of my life, is trying to go on this journey and uncover all these things and figure out what they mean. And then I don't want it to just be, you know, Terence McKenna and me making some YouTube videos and all this stuff. Like I'm convinced ritual really does work.
Yeah.
Like rituals really do affect the nature of reality. And it'd be great to have a place where people of like-mindedness who want to have families, who want their kids to grow up in this type of understanding of the world, you can have that. And then make YouTube videos. So like, you know, it's not like I'm going to be talking every Sunday, but people coming in, whoever it be, film it, put it up on YouTube, have classes on how you're doing, you know, as a father in your family, or, you know, women getting together and creating a video on motherhood, or, you know, and then creating just a videos, all this content related to these ideas and acting out in the world. I mean, I want to really re-articulate Christianity in a way, and I'm not the only one. I mean, you know, Jordan Peterson has done this for a lot of people.
Although he's dead, man.
Exactly. So that's like another aspect. I want to teach, but I also want to. I feel really compelled to try to open up some type of community, and a beautiful place where people can go and worship. They can listen to other people speak. They can go and pray and meditate and do whatever they want to do, and understand about all the different world religions. Not like it's just going to be Christianity. It's going to be Christian themed because it's going to be devoted to the Logos. I mean, the whole thing is that the thing that's going to be worshipped is Jesus symbolically, but what's being worshipped is the Logos. And, so, I mean, in the next 5 to 10 years, that's what I see myself moving back.
How much school you got left?
I'm in my second year, and so I have 2 to 3 years, depending on when I finish the dissertation.
Yeah. You're in the Bay Area, right?
Yeah, I'm in Berkeley.
Can you see yourself staying there, though?
Like, no, not at all. Not at all.
From political climate, or
just the whole
economy. Yeah. I'm scared, man. My goal was, when I left Southern Illinois, was to probably stay in San Diego and practice medicine here, because the type of medicine that I practice it's more optimal medicine. I do a lot of testosterone replacement, growth hormone analogs, and they're pricey things. I take them, I help other people with those areas. And the market probably isn't as strong for that in Southern Illinois. And I'm not licensed as an ND in Illinois. I can practice like in Canton. So I'm handcuffed. But on the other side, I grew up, I have a farm, I'm a farmer. I'm from a 5th, 6th generation farm. So I have farmland out there. And part of me is like, man, I should just go back and start a community, organic farm and do some of the things you're saying. I have a buddy now, he's moving to Boise, and he literally just bought land, like 10 acres, and him and his wife and 2 kids are going there, and his brother and his family are moving there, because part of that has to do with the political climate. And he's like, I got to get out of here. He thinks like the economy's going to crash. Like he's to that point. And I don't know. It's so weird coming from Southern Illinois to here. It was already a big disconnect, just the type of culture. And then in the last 5 years that I've been here, things have just gotten even weirder. Like the housing market's doubled. Just the political climate. I'm just kind of like, shit, man, maybe I got to get out of here, because if shit hits the fan when I'm here, I don't know what I'm going to do.
Right. No, I when I first moved here, because as you know, Terence McKenna, he went to school at Berkeley. And for example, like the Gnostic astronaut video, there's a handful of videos that I've made on my channel that I found those audios of the school that I go to.
That is cool, man.
What are the chances of a guy who has a YouTube channel devoted towards these various thinkers, and I find tapes on the internet in the basement of a library?
That is
crazy.
Synchronicity.
And so, oh, absolutely. And that happened the first semester I was here, and I was like, oh, I'm convinced I'm where I need to be. But I can't stand the political climate, the cultural climate here in Berkeley in the Bay Area. I mean, I wonder what they're so proud about, right? I mean, the streets are filthy. The homelessness is crazy. Everything's expensive. Everything's overpriced. I mean, you can't, as a teacher, there's so many universities here that if you're a tenured professor, they just wait till you retire, and then they just hire a bunch of younger professors to do your job for a quarter of the price. So you can't even here in the Bay Area as a young scholar. It's so hard to get tenure. I mean, you can't. So everybody's working for like $40,000 a year, and they have to go. They have PhDs, they have school loans, so they have to go teach at 2 different schools. And it's like, man, I don't want to live that life. Like, I don't know what. The natural beauty here in the Bay Area is remarkable, and California generally. The natural beauty is absolutely breathtaking. But in terms of these major California cities, I don't understand what they're so proud about. I mean, here I know that you're able to be non-binary and whatever you want to be, and you can walk down the street with your purple hair, and it's all good. But I just don't understand, like, everything seems backwards to me.
They're proud, and like it's getting more and more energy behind whatever that movement is, the political discourse, the increase in prices. And I'm with you. Part of the reasons I moved to San Diego was it is gorgeous, man. The sunset every night. You know, it was 75 degrees outside, and I'm from Southern Illinois. You know what that's like. It sucks, man. It sucks. And so I'm really torn. Like, cause that was kind of my ambitions, my dreams to sit here. And now I'm to the point where I want to start doing more podcasting and doing more YouTube videos and figuring out online health stuff, just because everything's going that way. And then you get the freedom to do what you want.
Exactly. So for me, that's really made me reevaluate what I thought I was going to do. Cause I thought I was going to come here, get my Ph.D. and probably stay in California and teach at some university. But now it's like, well, hell, why would I stay at a university when I could just devote lessons and courses and stuff online, like,
pull JP and create your own like online program, man.
Exactly.
A lot of doctors are doing that, man.
And that's what I've been thinking about is, if I had a community where, we were having a church, we were doing things, but then I also had my own platform to teach. And then I also had my own platform, to produce videos of other people and all this stuff. And then I also had a classroom in. I mean, that's kind of what feels right now. And for me, it is moving back to somewhere that isn't so it just seems so chaotic here. Like, it just seems like people, I mean, I may be exposing a little bit of my cards here, but I babysit for a very wealthy family, and they have a young son. He's 6 years old. And I pick him up from school. And inside his school, it's a public school here in Berkeley, they have like a wall dedicated to trans people, and they celebrate transsexuality and the LGBTQ stuff. And I'm totally for people doing whatever they want to do. But like, sex education doesn't occur until like 7th or 8th grade. Why are these public schools telling kids about transsexuality and having them question if they're a boy or a girl when they're 5 and 6 years old? I mean, that's crazy, especially when the community has a 40 to 50% suicide rate. I mean, like, that's not good for just mental health. And not saying that maybe they'll grow up to be transsexual. That's fine. But here, like, hormone blockers are celebrated.
Yeah. And it's progressive to the point of where it's almost like there's going to be more problem. And I won't even say problems. There's just more mess to be made with it.
Right.
Is what I see. And I see that here all the time. Like, we had that. And I was out of school by the time that happened. I don't know what I had done. One of my friends had sent, I think I showed you one of the slideshows. They talked about how gender is a spectrum. Right. And I'm just like, okay, it's kind of like the abortion argument, the wall argument. I see an argument for both sides. I just don't want to say this is the right way. Like, maybe it could be the right way, but I just would much rather just like, let's be conservative and stay in the middle. And I don't know. I just don't see how we can't go wrong with that answer. Like, don't say, it's kind of like when the evolution creationist arguments started happening. Like, why not just look at them both? And then let everyone make up their own damn mind. Like, you have to say, this is the right way. This is the right way. And again, I think that comes back to the materialistic and atheist view of the universe. It's like this way or this way. No,
exactly.
It's gray, man. It's so gray.
it has to do with about man implementing the way that he perceives the world to be.
Yeah.
Right. So, and that's where I see a lot of this gender stuff coming from. It's like what, I don't know. It just seems so forced upon people. And
Yeah,
then,
I think it's like a 13-year-old man. Again, I'll be sexist. Female, like they want to be rebellious. There's just like this. The progressiveness gets so progressive that you're doing it for the sake of being progressive. You're not doing it for the sake of whatever moral obligation you think you have. I have friends like that. Oh, I got to go march for this. I got to go march for that. So I'm like, we all know that doesn't do anything. Right. And you're just being lazy and procrastinating whatever work you should be doing to go march downtown, and then it ends up in a riot and you bust open a bank window. Like, I don't know, but and
to me, that whole process is an absence. It's the absence of religion, or at least some type of fundamental structure in people's lives. Because where are they finding community? Where are they finding their morals? They're finding within these political ideologies, which then they go with these groups and people, and then they're, these echo chambers. Then they're reaffirmed by, oh yeah, this is right, and people who don't believe this are wrong.
Yeah,
it creates this another dualistic religious lens, just like the Gnostics to a degree. That those people are evil, we're the good people, and
go get them.
Exactly. And it's just crazy, my interactions here with other students, and how just bringing up gender in terms of like, if men and women are different, then how do we understand that, in terms of then there's infinite amount of genders. Like, that doesn't really make sense. I guess there'd be no gender at all. Like,
I wish I could be there for some of your conversations, and vice versa, man. I had a tough 4 years. I had a really tough 4 years when we'd go through psychology classes talking about a large variety of these things. And I would be like, I don't agree with that, and the people are like, what? How? Oh, he's from the Midwest. He's he's white. He's a male. I'm like,
exactly. And that's what they fall back to. It's like, they immediately go to your race, your gender,
hominins attacks, right?
Whatever class stratification you came from. So, and this is what I noticed with my own professors here, despite how intelligent they are. And I don't want to mean like my whole experience has been categorized by that, because I've had professors who are very open-minded, and, we have great conversations back and forth, and they see the world closer to my view than the default position here. Mm-hmm. But, it's not where I'd want. Like, I wouldn't want to raise a kid here, because there's no principle. Like, nothing's principled. And I notice this in politics too, even with the right and the left. It's like, I just appreciate people that have a principled perspective, right? So if you're anti-war and Trump says he's going to bring troops home, you should be celebrating that. But if now you're critiquing that, that shows that you're not principled. Yeah. Right. And that's just a political example, but I just see that everywhere, in the world. It's just like, there's people that are principled and there's people that aren't principled. And it seems like the principled people are the ones that are actually taking a stance, no matter where they line up on the spectrum. And then you see this with the intellectual dark web, although, whatever that is, I don't really consider Joe Rogan, an intellectual thought leader. But
man, dude, Joe, I would put Joe in there with McKenna and Watts. Just he has. There's a lot of things I don't agree with him, but at least he brought to light a lot of Graham Hancock and
No, I totally agree with that. But I just wonder how. I mean, like, people like the Weinstein brothers, I disagree with their politics. They are incredible.
Oh yeah.
Love listening. So sharp, especially Eric. I mean, the guy is a genius, and they're principled, right? So even we disagree on the political spectrum, they're principled in the way that they perceive the world and the way they act in it, and therefore now they're within a particular realm of people, right? And that's what I'm seeing is, like, there's principled people, and then there's just part of the mob, and the mob's on both the left and right, but particularly the mob's on the left right now. And and 30 years ago it was on the right. It had to do with Christian fundamentalists.
And I don't know what it's like where you're from, and if anyone from home's listening to me, I love everyone at home. But one of the things liberals don't understand, the extreme left, I won't even say liberals, just the alt left, is that they come to this place of like demanding and hostility. I'm like, you get hostile in some parts of where I'm from, and you're not going to be able to, raise a sign. Like, you might get, there's going to be some violence. Like, if you get around the real, and like, I don't like making that threat. I'm like, okay, alt left, you think you're dangerous. Like, when the alt right comes out, like, we've seen that happen in the past. We do not want that. We do not want that.
Exactly. I mean, they're, I mean, just archetypically, or little as an archetype, it's like the men that are part of this progressive agenda, they wouldn't stand a chance against the good old boys where we come from. I mean, they are, and at least the good old boys have like a rooting in like a foundational history, right? At least maybe they're really fundamental in their Christianity, but they're rooted within a tradition that's persisted through history.
Yeah.
These other people have something totally new, and even their morals, as you're saying, it's kind of floating on a bit, but their morals are Christian. I mean, they hate Christianity, yet why do they so concerned about minorities and helping people?
Exactly.
Right?
Where did that come from?
What religious tradition is so focused on that? One religious tradition particularly.
Yep.
And it's like they're still acting out the myths of their culture, and they don't even realize it.
And are you afraid? I get the whole multicultural thing. I'm still trying to wrap my head around that, and especially from the view of if you get in a religion's, if one religion's a little more dominant and they're less accepting, they're going to take over the other religions that are more multicultural. Does that make sense? Like you've kind of heard that with Islam coming in. Islam's like, we're sticking to our guns, and Christians like, come on in, you know.
But that's part of why people are so afraid to critique it. I mean, like that's why apologizing to the mob, I think, is it's again, it's almost like a magic ritual, right? Because if you do that, you're submitting it in front of your king. You know, you're taking the knee. And who's your king? It's the voice of the mob. Well, Muslims don't do that. And how come you don't see that on the media? How come the LGBTQ community isn't upset with, you know, gays in the Middle East?
They're like, they're pushing them off freaking houses and stuff and killing them out in the streets. Like,
they care for it. And, I mean, nobody says anything. I mean, like the perfect example right now is in Iran. All these women who are fighting to not have to veil themselves, and they're being arrested and they're being beaten in the streets. And Western feminism has National Hijab Day, right? For some reason, in Western feminists, it's more feminist to wear a hijab than the women who are fighting to not wear it.
Yeah, it's kind of like the white savior complex, you know, like we got to go in.
I think it has to do with white guilt. I think what Western civilization is going through is like a lot of these progressives are just, they feel not necessarily conscious of it, but they're acting out like they're self-flagellating themselves, just like the people did in the, you know, 1,000 years ago in the streets. You know, like they're flagellating themselves, and they're just guilty because of history. They're guilty. I mean, like being an American, for some reason, it's like being pro-America means you're pro-sexism and racism.
You're a nationalist, you evil nationalist.
Oh,
Am I supposed to be a globalist? Like,
I made people drop their jaw when my sociology professor was talking about how, you know, how we just need to accept each other and we're going to form this one world government. And I was like, don't we need nationalism before we get globalism? And they're like, stop. And I'm like, why are we talking about a global government when
you Nazi?
When the Syrians can't even, you know, worship in their places of you know, of religious worship. They can't even go to their mosques, their churches. You know, what are we talking about? What are we talking about? We're talking about, because it's obviously not about everybody being able to do what they want to do.
Yeah, it's not. It's not. And that there's just no forethought in like, we'll figure it out as you go. I'm like, not a good idea.
Absolutely not.
But hey, Patrick, man, we're running long here. I mean, we can go all night, man. I would love to, we should have another conversation again in a month or two. I appreciate, sorry to put the brakes on real quick, but let's wrap things up. Any kind of closing thoughts on everything here?
Not a whole lot. I mean, we kind of covered a lot of ground there.
We covered a lot of ground, man. We opened up a lot of bag of worms, and there's a lot of those subjects that we didn't even touch the surface on. Some stuff that, you know, I'd love to talk to you more about symbolism and kind of, there's so much in there. I had so many questions when I watched a lot of your symbolism videos. But until next time, Patrick, Fractal Youniverse is your YouTube. Where do people find you?
Yeah. YouTube, Fractal Youniverse. On Twitter, it's real DP Harry. Just my initials, David Patrick Harry. And then on Instagram, I post a lot of art and stuff like that, visionary art, psychedelic art, and that is at DP Harry on Instagram. But I'm planning on to produce more videos here in the next.
Shit, man. They're good. They're good.
Like 4 or 5 months, really focusing on trying to highlight instances of mushroom symbolism and Amanita muscaria symbolism within Christianity, and kind of uncover various churches, various instances of that. Mm-hmm. And I would love to get into like fairy tales and myths and just start almost creating my own series, you know, incorporated with the other videos on just discussing symbols, myths, and all this stuff, and trying to show that there's a lot within Western civilization that we should be proud of. Not that Western civilization is the only thing we should look at, of course not. But it seems like that is like somehow put down, and like just try to show that, you know, I don't know, there's just a lot more embedded wisdom in there than we're led to believe.
At least stuff to uncover and things to find out. Talking about everything in that you were just hitting on, it reminded me of Graham Hancock's book. What's the blue one? Supernatural?
Oh, okay.
That one?
No, I have not.
Yeah, it was really good. He started off by doing Ibogaine, and then he started talking about alien spirits and how they all intertwined, and that was one of my favorite. I didn't even do the Fingerprints of the Gods. I did a second one.
Oh, Magicians of the Gods?
Yeah, I did that one. I audiobooked that one. Another great guy that I assume you're very aligned with a lot of his stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I would make more videos of his and stuff like that, but I have to be careful because I get hit with copyright strikes.
Yeah.
So it's like the only people I can really focus on and know that I'm not going to get claimed is like Terence McKenna, because none of his stuff. It was copyrighted one time by photosynthesis. What was it? Some companies photosynthesis, something. It was a company, and they recorded a lot of his audios, but they went out of business. So then all those audios are up for grab, essentially, that are going around the internet.
Oh, so good for you, man.
You don't get hit for those. A lot of Rupert Sheldrake, he doesn't care about his.
That's awesome.
I was Randall Carlson, but I got hit with copyright strikes from his. He's very protective, but he should be. I mean, he has great stuff.
Yeah.
But you can't post his stuff online without going through him.
It's weird how all these, like I said, after I started following your YouTube channel, I'm like, I wonder if he knows about this. I wonder if he knows about that. And I assume your experience is like mine. When I go out and talk to most people, a lot of them you can't scratch the surface on. But there's been one or two other guys. I've done these podcasts with my buddy Rhett from home. He was an hour away from me. Same thing. We met when I was like 23. First thing Graham Hancock, the pyramids, the Sphinx, man, it's older than we thought. Like, what? You know about him? I know about him. The whole we're best friends.
No, exactly. No, it's so true. I mean, the friends that I come in contact with, I mean, in the last 10 years of my life, it's basically been like that. It's like, again, this merging of journeys, and you have to know so much before you even get like, and that's why YouTube has been a blessing for me, because to dive into this stuff continually, constantly, and then not have an outlet for it, you start to isolate yourself because you want to share with. Not everybody wants to hear it. Yeah, absolutely. And so, I mean, we can end it there, but I'd love to come back and talk more about symbols and myths and religion and
we got some ground to cover, man. And I haven't really I want to find more people, like us. And that's kind of when I saw your stuff, and the girl I'm seeing now, she's like, oh my God, that guy is your twin. You need to talk to him. And I'm like, yes, I'm going to reach out and talk to him. And so I'm real glad we did this. Do you know of any other places? There's a couple other channels like Spiritual Awakening that's similar to yours on YouTube. Or do you know any of those other people out there? Or
I don't actually.
I did watch your video with the guy from Spoon of Consciousness. I haven't looked at a lot of his stuff, but he seems kind of.
I mean, I'm not big into. I've been kind of turned off with the whole spiritual woo-woo stuff in terms of I don't know. I mean, it's hard to define what's real and what's not real once you get into this stuff. But as somebody trying to get their Ph.D., when I hear people talking about medicine or whatever, and they didn't go to med school and they didn't do the science, and really they just read a few books here and there and they watch YouTube videos.
Yeah,
I can't on that, and I don't support that message. I support people that have done the reading, that you can trust what they're saying because they're walking the walk.
Yeah. And that's another conversation. That's a tough line. I'm with you, because there are so many holistic health practitioners. So my degree, I had a 4-year undergraduate, took me 5 because I switched majors. That's a whole nother story. And yeah, I had 4 years of medical school, 2 years of it's basically an in-house residency. And now I've had a year and a half of, seeing patients. So when people talk about a vegan diet, I'm like, I've seen it. I've seen their labs. I know what it does to people.
Right.
But there is a level of like, I don't know, letting the amateurs kind of, because sometimes, you have people like freaking John Anthony West, so it's like,
oh man, he was a genius. Yeah, he was great.
yeah. So,
and that's what Joe Rogan is so important, because he brought so many of these people like Graham Hancock and Dennis McKenna and all these different people kind of to the light.
The other channel, I think it's called Academy of Ideas.
Oh yeah, that's a great channel. Yeah, that's a great channel.
I'm gonna find those guys. I think they're two brothers from Canada and see what they know, man. I think
that's a great channel.
Their stuff is really like a lot of it's like almost like Jordan Peterson Jr. stuff.
Right. So. There's a guy that you may want to check out. I watch his videos. He's a theological dude.
Okay.
Well, more it's about Christian history, but he is a freaking whiz on Christianity and from its inception. His name is Ryan Reed, and he has a YouTube channel. It has about 80,000 subscribers.
Oh, good
but
for him.
He might be a conversation. I mean, his stuff is really sharp. And then Jonathan Pageau, are you familiar with him?
Yes, I am. I got to think. The name is there, but I'm trying to put a connection to him.
So he is friends with Jordan Peterson, and he's an Orthodox icon carver.
Yes. I have seen one or two of his videos. I should look into more of his stuff.
Another guy who's posting cool stuff like on these same lines is Akira the Don. Have you ever heard of him?
Yeah, dude. I love his stuff, man.
Yeah, his mixes are great.
Dude, the JP wave, man. I lived in LA for 6 months, and all I did I would like sit in traffic and listen to JP wave, like JP wave 5 and 6. And that's awesome. That stuff. I love that. It's just this collaboration of, like you're saying, this center folding of all these different ideas. And then you put it into music. It's like that. I almost don't get how that stuff isn't more popular. I'm so glad that you're doing well. Academy of Ideas doing well. These other guys you're talking about, Ryan. So Ryan Reed.
Yeah. He's a Ph.D. in South Carolina, and he teaches at a theological school or seminary school or something. But he has these really beautifully done YouTube videos that are like 10 to 30 minutes long on whether it's like Charlemagne or the filioque, so the split between the Catholic Church and the Orthodox Church over the role of the Holy Spirit.
Oh wow, I'm in. I'm gonna check it out.
So he's great on this stuff. He's a Protestant, but he has this really wonderful understanding of Christian history and Western civilization. And he must have some connection to get the art that he uses, because whatever topic he's talking about, he has art that I can't find on the internet. So, but it's really good stuff. But
cool. Well, let's wrap it up there, Patrick. Hey, dude, again, we'll do this again. Really happy to have you. Go check out his stuff, Fractal Youniverse. See you.